Propaganda usually produces an emotional rather than a rational response to the information that is being presented. Basically, political and religious convictions are conveyed in such a way that will allow the propagandist to have control over how people are going to act. And children propaganda during the war was no exception from this. The published material actually constituted a significant part of children's literature for that time. Already in September 1914, German magazines such as Der gute Kamerad or Das Kränzchen were writing about the war. French children's magazines such as Filet and Cricri also focused on the war, while war themes were less prevalent in British periodicals like Chums and Young England. Such children's books actually boomed before Christmas 1914, the irony of that. As a counterpart to antiquated war images, small children were shown a colorful, idealized world. Fairy tales and children's books were adapted to the war. For example, French Little Red Riding Hood was attacked by the German Bad Wolf Bocha. Illustrated by the famous caricaturist Herbert Rickley, the 23-page children's book Hurrah, ein Kriegsbilderbuch tells us about Little Willie, who read too many books with pictures and outplayed soldiers. When the boy fell asleep, he had a dream about meeting hordes of silly and cowed French, Russians, Serbs and British, who insidiously used animals to defeat Germany. He was in the company of his Austrian friend Franzl and an heroic dog. There is no doubt that the victory was on the needed side, at least before awakening. In addition to this, picture and ABC books with war themes for young children such as Alphabet de la Grande Guerre were included in children's day-to-day school life. Children will have to correlate A with Alsace, C with charge, T with trench, and U with uniform. Alongside this interesting release, the British also published their own alphabet in order to transfer the hostilities to the world of children and to explain why their parent is on the front and fighting for the country. ABC for Baby Patriots was the name of their alphabet, and it presented the great power of the British over the colonies, and it had many racist nuances. Beginning in 1915, children's propaganda was overtaken by the reality of war. More serious themes like activities of children on the home front, prisoner transports, and even the death of children's fathers now appeared. Especially in Catholic and Protestant books, prayer became a child's strongest weapon. As the war became more global, some children's books, as for example in Austria-Hungary and Germany, were published by so-called war aid agencies and patriotic associations. While literature for children up to the age of 10 to 12 hardly adjusted to modern warfare, youth novels featured more and more technological themes. By early 1917, war themes in children's books and magazines had started to decrease. Particularly in Germany and Austria, war awareness and paper shortages affected the book market. Rising prices significantly reduced the production of children's books. War books from the first phase of the war, however, were published. As a result, euphoric propaganda from the beginning of the war remained in the public sphere until 1918. Although the effect of the literary mobilization of children is not measurable, it is possible to speculate. When looking at circulation numbers, dissemination seemed to be very different depending on the age of the readers and the countries. German picture books for young children were not very widespread. 12,000 copies of the children's book Für unsere Kriegskind were produced in 1916. The Red Cross published the book Des Kindes Kriegsbilderbuch in 1915. Of 4,000 published copies, 700 were still unsold in 1918. Compared to the production of other pictures books at the time, these numbers were relatively high. The circulation number of youth literature were higher than picture books. More than 50,000 copies of the war novel Foucault's On est den Vater were produced in 1915. In France, copies of children's war books like Nos alliés les Américains reach up to 100,000 copies. All in all, this kind of books try to normalize the reality of war in front of children and provide them with answers on why their fathers are gone fighting, why they need to be sympathetic with their country winning the war, and also indoctrinate them in order to become tools of easy use for the war effort.